Ontario MPP Roman Baber wants the provincial government to prevent employers from suspending or even firing workers who refuse to get vaccinated for COVID-19. And so it is that he plans to introduce a private member's bill called Jobs and Jabs when the legislature resumes sitting next month. Now, if Baber's name rings a bell, it's likely because of this news story. Remember a few months ago, folks, when he was booted from the PC caucus for speaking out against lockdowns. Well, now he sits as an independent. We did reach out to Mr. Baber for comment, but he's only giving interviews to mainstream media outlets for some unspoken reason. But we do have two people who are more than happy to weigh in on the proposed Jobs and Jabs bill, and that would be the co-founders of the New Blue Party, Jim and Belinda Karahalios. Hey, Jim and Belinda, thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us, David.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Well, first of all, what do you make of Roman Baber's proposed bill?
Well, for the last 2 months, we've actually been speaking out, obviously, about the vaccine mandates, but we've also been talking about introducing legislation and what we would do if we were in power governing the province. And so it was surprising to see that Roman has finally come around and is implementing and adopting some of these new blue policy ideas.
It's so great, Dave. Like, you know, for those of us that, Dave, you follow PC party politics, Roman comes from the red side of the Ontario PC party. And you remember this campaign, Dave, right? Axe the carbon tax.
Yes.
A few years ago when the red establishment of the PC party said we got to be for a carbon tax. And Roman was behind leadership campaigns like Christine Elliott's and then Peter MacKay's federally. The red side of the party finally came around on the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign, and Roman voted in favor of the lockdown bill, Bill 195. Belinda was the only PC MPP, current or former, to say no to it. She got kicked out of the government. And now we see Reds like Roman, Dave, coming around and putting into their private members' bills the ideas that we've been talking to for 2 months. Because, Dave, it's not enough to just say, we're going to get rid of the passport, and that's what's got to be done. We've got to go further, Dave. We've got to protect people with their jobs and their access rights. And Roman's bill doesn't go far enough, but it's a great first step. And leadership is contagious, Dave. And when you lead, at first it's lonely, but it gets contagious, and we're happy to see Roman get on side.
So, Jim, are you saying that Roman, I guess, cribbed his Jobs and Jabs private members bill that he intends to introduce from your policy?
Well, look, policy ideas, they're not original, Dave. They come from many places. You look at other jurisdictions. We've been talking about it for a couple months. The New Blue Party central plank next year, when we have candidates running against Doug Ford's Liberal PC party, is we need to protect the jobs and the access rights of individuals across Ontario. And Belinda said it last week in an interview with you. It's nobody's business whether you've been vaccinated or not. And Roman's come around after 2 months, and he's putting his first private member's bill when the legislature returns on that same issue. And it's great. It doesn't go far enough, Dave, because he's just changing the Employment Standards Act, which puts the onus on the employee to go to the labor board or to sue. But it's a great first step, and we're going to come out with a lot more aggressive stuff to roll all this stuff back. And Dave, I got to say, when a red like Roman is agreeing with New Blue Party policy, you know we're moving the needle.
You know, but I got to tell you, Jim, Belinda, it's odd that he shuns us, because he is simpatico with our stance on the lockdowns, on the vaccination passports, the idea that you could lose your job for not getting vaccinated. And yet he has all the time in the world for the mean girls of the media party, as my boss Ezra likes to call them. What, I'm just trying to figure out what his strategy is.
I mean, it's hard to say he's door knocking for Walmart lobbyist Melissa Lantzman, and, he campaigned for Christine Elliott and Peter MacKay. So he is more on side with that establishment group.
And, who knows? You got to ask him, Dave, what the strategy is. But at the end of the day, whether it's Axe the Carbon Tax, fighting voter fraud in PC party nominations, standing for the grassroots, he did vote in favor of Bill 195 last year. Belinda was the only one to vote against it. But with enough political pressure, you can get people to start moving their position. And that's what we're doing with the New Blue Party. So you have to call him, Dave, and ask him what his strategy is. But we're happy to see on this fundamental issue, even though he's not really a conservative on everything else that he's shown us since he first ran for Patrick Brown in a nomination a couple of years ago, on this fundamental issue, we've been able to move people like Roman to start sharing with some of the things that we're pushing, and that's good news for Ontario. When you start a new party and you're fighting against the carbon tax, you're fighting against these lockdowns, like Belinda, you're voting against Bill 195 and against the establishment ramming this down the throats of people, it gets lonely. They don't answer your calls anymore, Dave. But on the flip side, we've got thousands of people who sent in signatures to sign up a new party. We're coming out with our membership portal soon. We've got over 1,000 people who've donated, thousands who said, when are you guys opening the membership portal so I can buy a membership? So for us, it's great trading off those establishment phone calls for real hardworking grassroots Ontario voters.
At the end of the day, though, Jim and Belinda, here's the thing. A private member's bill rarely passes. Is there any hope for this private member's bill once he does table it?
So they haven't even released. So as you know, Parliament was, the legislature was prorogued.
Yes.
So we're now starting on a fresh slate. So the PMB lineup, for lack of a better word, hasn't even been released yet. So Roman doesn't even know if he's going to get a chance to debate this bill. Like, he can certainly table it, which is just first reading, but the actual fulsome debate and getting it passed, that opportunity may not even be available to him because we don't know what that looks like right now.
And when it gets released, are you going to support him? Are you going to make sure it gets debated? It'd be a good debate.
It would be an excellent debate. So I'm looking forward to joining in on that debate.
Belinda put forward Bill 150 a couple years ago against voter fraud in internal party nominations. And, it looked like that wasn't going to pass. And then it was unanimously passed by public pressure. So you never know where these things go. But at the end of the day, Belinda's happy to help Roman get it to the floor for debate. And we got to hear the arguments on the other side. It's not a perfect bill. There are issues with the bill in the sense that maybe the emergency orders override the Employment Standards Act, things that we'll be looking into to see how we can bolster it. But we got to get these ideas out there. That's what we've been doing for 2 months. It's so great to see Roman picking up on that and taking one of our ideas, putting it in a bill, because next year we've got to get as many of these ideas out there and spur the debate amongst Ontario voters across the province.
And Jim and Belinda, I think, moving forward in the months and years ahead, not just for Ontario, not just for Canada, but for countries around the world, this is going to be the huge issue in the news cycle, these mandatory vaccination passports. And if you don't get the jabs, you're going to lose your jobs. And I'm just wondering, surely there will be court challenges in the time ahead, but I'm kind of, fearful in a sense. Howard Levitt, he advertises himself as Canada's preeminent labor lawyer. And he said on several occasions that, according to what he can see, employers do have this right for you to ask of you to get vaccinated. And if you don't, they can fire you. What are your thoughts? I mean, is this maybe Mr. Levitt misinterpreting the Employment Act, or is it just going to be a lawyer's paradise, like I said, in the months ahead as these issues are taken up in court?
So I'll let Jim touch the legal aspect, but I will say that on the constituency side of things, I can't even tell you the number of phone calls I've had and the meetings I've had with people who are beside themselves because they're going to lose their job, that they're being threatened with loss of work and loss of income. They can't support their families simply because they've made a choice not to take a vaccine, or they've chosen not to disclose whether or not they've taken the vaccine. And it is nothing short of sinful, really, what's happening. And then you've got, Minister Elliott today even saying how if, businesses can call the police. Our police forces are stretched thin as it is. And now you want them to, deal with masking, and now people not wanting to share private medical information. Like, it's a mess. And you're again, the government, they're really good at this, pitting people against people. That's what they're doing again.
And it's really funny, Dave, anytime I'm a lawyer, and anytime someone would call a lawyer to get an opinion, it's very rare that you get a lawyer saying, oh, you're going to win 100%, or oh, you're going to lose 100%. But I'm hearing more and more from these employment lawyers who would take any case when someone gets fired. And they're coming out and they're saying no chance on this one. And it's bizarre, Dave. Like, it's very, very weird that these lawyers are buckling under the establishment. And because typically they'll just sandbag clients to run up the bill, a lot of them, to get the client on side. So I'm not buying the opinion. And every case is different. It depends on what your employment contract says. Are you in a union? Are you employed by the government? Is it a private business? What are the policies of the business? What was your offer letter when you got the job? Very fact-specific stuff. But what we're pushing from a political government legislative approach, Dave, is we've got to put solutions forward. It's not enough to just change the Employment Standards Act and say we put it on the onus on the person who loses their job to sue and try to find a lawyer somewhere in Ontario with a backbone. We need government to step up. This issue, this problem, Dave, created by government, we need to put government back in the position where it's going to solve the problems they created. Dave.
Oh, I totally agree, Jim. And I mean, we're talking about a matter of personal choice about, let's be frank, an experimental vaccine going into one's body. It's kind of funny. For decades, the feminist movement has long said, my body, my choice, when it comes to terminating a baby's life. In terms of the abortion debate, we've long heard from the progressives, reasonable accommodation. We must reasonably accommodate minorities. What's happened to those chestnuts, guys, in 2021 when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine?
They don't exist anymore, Dave. They don't, because you're telling people that they can get religious exemptions and medical exemptions, and then you're seeing the CPSO outright saying that physicians cannot write an exemption unless you've already had a first dose and have had a reaction. Like, I mean, you can't tell me there's an exemption and then not provide actual reasons to get the exemption. It's incredible.
And it's really sad how hard government and the institutions have wedged the issue on one side, and put the rest of us in a position. Look, Dave, I might have an opinion and say I don't think it's an experimental vaccine, but I don't think there have been enough long-term studies on it that everyone's comfortable with. There might be 100 reasons why you're not comfortable taking the vaccine. And it's really no one's business, Dave. And, we just saw, I think it was yesterday, a hospital in Ottawa sends out an email. Oops, we accidentally disclosed every single employee in an email blast who hasn't gotten the vaccine. I was so disgusted, I didn't go back to see if they ended up apologizing. But they've wedged the issue so hard on one side, so aggressively, where now we're not going to be able to go into a restaurant for those who are unvaccinated, or you're not going to be able to. I don't even know how we're going to organize politically, Dave, a meeting with people who haven't been vaccinated, because the key to this whole thing is to keep people away from meeting with each other in public places, obviously. I don't know how you politically organize, but when the government wedges so hard on one side, Dave, it makes any rational discussion seem like you're on the total opposite side of the issue.
Yeah, and it is a very serious issue, I think. I mean, guys, we know that a vaccine typically takes 10 years to develop. If you can get it out the door in 5, that's considered rapid fire. This one was done in less than a year. And partly that was because the normal approvals, the red tape, that was taken off. Usually I'm a pro get rid of red tape kind of guy, but when it's about something going into your body, and I think I'm biased, I'm a 1962 baby. I can tell you back then, there was a drug approved for morning sickness for pregnant women called thalidomide in Canada, not in the US. And my mother had horrible morning sickness. She had a prescription filled. Thank God, I don't know what it was, woman's intuition, a hunch, who knows. She never took a single tablet. It stayed in her nightstand. And if not, I could, if people don't know the story of thalidomide, it led to terrible birth defects thanks to this drug that, like I said, was approved in Canada but was not approved in other jurisdictions. So maybe I have a bias that way, and I'm not saying that the COVID-19 shot is going to cause birth defects or anything like that. It's just, I think, a cautionary tale that when you're putting something into your body, I kind of want the due process to play out.
Totally, Dave. And look, you're giving us one example why someone might be uncomfortable with their own past experiences on a vaccine. And, this attack that you're on one side of the issue, you're not, or you're an anti-vaxxer, this aggressive clamping down by all the establishment parties does not encourage science or debate or anything like that. It's actually putting the whole situation a lot worse, because at the end of the day, we've got to decipher through fact and fiction on both sides. And their approach is not scientific on that discourse.
No, they're almost dehumanizing people who have chosen not to disclose or not to get the vaccine. And that's very dangerous territory.
Well, you mean like calling people a bunch of yahoos, perhaps? But guys, one last question. I've seen some of your policy statements of the New Blue Party. I really like them. Tell me, though, it is a Herculean task for a startup party to gain traction, regardless of the political stripe. And yet, I look at what's happened in this province in the last couple of years. In addition to Roman Baber getting kicked out of caucus, you had Randy Hillier, Rick Nichols, of course, for not getting vaccinated. That was the most shameful, perhaps, removal from caucus. What I'm getting at, we have all these independent MPPs in the province. Have you reached out to them? Have you tried to get a critical mass in your party so it's not, just Belinda as the MPP, but, 4 or 5 others as well? Have you gone down that route? And if not, why not?
Oh, we've been very supportive, Dave. I don't know if you've been following all our communications, but Rick is the deputy speaker at Queen's Park because Belinda nominated him. No one else wanted to nominate him to run that speaker election. You seconded, what else was it?
Yeah, private member's bill about the pit bull ban. And it was a very controversial bill. And I supported him in that. I added my voice to the debate, saying that, let's bring it to committee and have a fulsome discussion about this. And, he wasn't getting a lot of support from the PC caucus at the time, and I did support him.
And, you remember, Dave, when we announced the New Blue Party last year, we've always said happy to have conversations with Randy. He's obviously busy on the federal side of politics right now. His daughter's running for the PPC. So when the federal vote winds down, we'll pick that up again. And, with Roman is the toughest one, Dave, because he's Red Roman. He comes from the part of the party on the PC side that don't like us very much. Let's be frank. And you've seen what they've done with us over the last few years, suing us, kicking us out of the party, that side of the party. So it could be tougher with Roman. But at the end of the day, we've been at this for a long time, Dave, and we're setting up a New Blue Party. Principles will be out soon, constitution, governance, and MPPs and former MPPs, municipal politicians that have reached out. They're going to see what we stand for, and we're happy to have discussions and include people for a new blue party, but we don't want to recycle the same old that we've seen in the past, Dave.
Okay, well, we're going to have to wrap it here, guys. Certainly, we have a fascinating election to watch on Monday, the federal election. Next year will be the Ontario provincial election. That might be equally as fascinating in terms of what's going to happen and what the legislature will look at like in Queen's Park in the years ahead. Jim, Belinda, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much. If you do bump into Roman, I'm happy to interview him too. And we'll just stay in touch. And I'm always happy to have you come on and talk about whatever in the news has perked your interest. So thank you again, guys.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Well, folks, can you believe it? Less than a week to go before the federal election. Tell me, do you trust what the mainstream media is reporting? I sure don't. Therefore, if you can, please go to realreporters.ca. That's realreporters.ca. If you're able to, kindly make a donation so that Rebel News can continue to bring you the other side of the story.